Yo, what's going on, Time Clan? It's your boy King Tynex here, back with another video, and you guys already know the deal. Remember to look at the links in the description below, because there will be links to my Discord. There will be a link to Neptune's channel, because they actually helped me a little bit with this what if, and they are actually working on their own what if at this moment. What if Data Live and DXD fused universes? They're also looking for a bit of help with this project, and a very big project. And essentially, what's the issue is that they're looking for a co-writer and an editor as well. So if you guys can basically help them out, I will be willing to actually uh, will be willing to plug your socials at the end of each one of my videos if you do help her. Anyways, that is it for right now, and time to roll that intro. So basically, here's how things would have gone in this version of events. It would have started off pretty regular for Izuku. By the age of 4, his life was pretty much the same as any sort of regular middle class kid in Japan, or in at least a court society. Unlike the other students, though, when Izuku turned 4 years old, he did not necessarily have any sort of flashy awakening of his quirk or anything. For example, like the first to awaken their quirk was actually Bakugo, and when it came on to him, like the very first thing he ended up doing was releasing a couple of explosions from his hands. Everybody was drawn towards him, and he would have started to grow a bit of an ego. The more days passed, the more people would start to awaken their quirks, but Izuku did not awaken his for some reason. Izuku would believe he's quirkless up until he and his mother would have went to the quirk doctor. When it came on to the doctor here, it's not actually the same one as in canon for, well, obvious reasons. We can't just have Dr. Ujiko finding out that, oh snap, we got a kid who has this and this sort of quirk. Let me take him to all for one. But yeah, that's pretty much how it would have went on. When it came on to the doctor, they would have looked at Izuku's skeleton and found out that Izuku was actually missing a toe joint, and they would have confirmed that, yeah, it appeared that Izuku would have a quirk. It was pretty rare for a person to be missing a toe joint like that and not awaken a quirk later on in their lives. This would have given Izuku hope for him being able to become a hero, and Izuku would be hoping that he would awaken a really strong quirk. As they made their way back home, Izuku would watch another All Might video on his mother's cell phone, where he would be rescuing 100 people from a burning building. Izuku would state that he wanted to be just like the #1 hero, hands touching his leg, his right leg to be more specifically, like more so around the knee area. Of course, this would have ended up spiking something though. After he stated that he would want to be just like All Might, he wanted to have a strong quirk just like All Might. Something would end up being activated. Izuku's quirk would have taken this into account, and Izuku unknowingly would have activated the conditions for his quirk to actually work. This would have ended up, well, causing a chain reaction from there on. The next day, Izuku would be at school playing games with some of the kids. He would see one of them getting bullied though out to the corner of his eye, and it was by Bakugo of all people, alongside his goons. Izuku would run up to the kid and try to protect him from Bakugo and his goons. Bakugo would have looked down on Izuku because of the fact that Izuku seemingly had yet to awaken his quirk, and he was thinking that Izuku was quirkless up until now. Izuku wouldn't be able to dodge because if he dodged Bakugo's attack, the kid he was trying to protect would end up getting injured instead. So instead, Izuku would end up forming an X. He would end up crossing his arms in an X fashion, preparing for the pain to come and hoping that this would only dampen it a little bit. But something else happened. Rather than getting injured, Izuku would only feel the intensity of the heat and force. He would not have been burned for some reason. There was no pain, there were no scratch marks, maybe like some scars or something, but that was about it. It was mainly from his clothes, but his skin, it looked like nothing had just happened to him. He would lower his arms and look at them, realizing there was absolutely no bruise marks. He was intrigued. Oh, what was the meaning of this? He would realize that he wasn't injured at all, and Bakugo and his goons would realize the same thing. They would all be surprised at that moment. The goons would think that it was probably just a fluke and that Bakugo didn't put enough force into the attack. He did not put his all into the attack, so they went on to actually try and fight Izuku all at once. Maybe then it would be something different. But something else once again happened. It was not just a fluke here. Izuku would fight back, and one blow was enough to knock them all out, since none of their attacks were really working on Izuku. The kid Izuku protected would run away in fear of Izuku, while Izuku would just get in trouble for it while fighting. His mother would immediately take him home in order to check on if he had any injuries, and then take him to the quirk doctor after hearing what happened, because this really did not make much sense to Inko beyond the fact that he must have awakened his quirk here. They would have taken him to the quirk doctor, who would have examined Izuku and test out Izuku's quirk. It would have appeared that Izuku had some sort of strength enhancer quirk, which also helped Izuku basically have a stronger skin as well for some reason. It was a rather powerful quirk at that, so Izuku would smile quite brightly hearing this from the doctor. They would even say that Izuku would make a pretty great hero one day if he continued to train this quirk. Izuku would listen to the doctor's words and make sure that he would do just that, train his quirk to the absolute limit. Over the years, Izuku would just try and learn more about his quirk, as far as he was concerned up until like around the age of 10. And he just thought that he had some sort of strength enhancer quirk. But he would also try and learn some more of the different requirements for his quirk. He would also be thinking about how he was looking at All Might's video, and then the next day, all of a sudden, boom, he has a quirk similar to All Might, in where he's super strong, fast, and durable. He would think that maybe there's more to the quirk than just strength enhancement. Maybe there's just something more to it, but he wasn't too sure, to be honest. By the age of 10, Izuku would also be getting into comics. He would end up actually getting into DC specifically, and he would wish to be like a hero by the name of Superman. He was seemingly even stronger than All Might, and he had several more abilities. He honestly even tried shooting lasers out of his eyes, but just like how a kid would try and do the Kamehameha or try and go Super Saiyan, it wasn't really all that intentional. He wasn't really expecting to shoot lasers out of his eyes or anything. But what ended up what ended up happening instead is that Izuku would actually think back to the time when he was 4, and he would try and test something out. Maybe if he were to grab his arm and say that he would have abilities similar to that of the likes of Superman, maybe. And this may have been a stretch, but maybe that would end up being the case. He would state these words. Next thing you know, Izuku would actually feel a bit of an itch in his eyes for some reason, but that would go away pretty quickly. He would squint a little bit, and from doing this, he would look at one of the walls. Doing this would actually activate, one of Superman's abilities, that being X-ray vision. He would exhale from his mouth and find that he also had frost breath. Well, wasn't this interesting? It seemed that his hypothesis was correct. He could definitely become the #1 hero now. Izuku would go on to learn how to control his abilities, while his mother would just be frightened seeing her son fly from time to time, since she originally thought he was just going to have super strength. Doctors already explained that it wasn't uncommon to have kids develop quirks seemingly completely different from their parents after all, but this was just becoming too much in her opinion. This was just getting ridiculous. I mean, come on now. Super strength, flight, frost breath, heat vision. Just how many abilities was Izuku going to awaken? And was this all just from one quirk? She wasn't too certain, to be honest, but granted, she never studied quirk science like that, so for all she knew, this was probably something normal. For the next 4 years, Izuku would go on to become a rather popular kid in his school. He had so many abilities, so much strength, and when it came on to Bakugo, his jealousy would go on to simply consume him. Bakugo would attempt to catch up to Izuku, pushing his quirk and body to the absolute limits each and every time, but even then it never seemed like he could ever really close the gap between him and Izuku. Izuku and Bakugo would actually be revealed to, be trying out for UA a couple years later when they were around the age of 14 years old. Right when the teacher was bringing in papers and admitting that nobody really cared about these papers because he knew that all of them wanted to grow up to become heroes after all. Although Bakugo would have stated that most of them would probably end up becoming side listers at best, sidekicks or something, and low-ranking heroes at that, not anybody within the top 10, 20, 30, heck even 50. They were the strongest kids in school though. Izuku and Bakugo, everybody knew that these two would be shoo-ins for UA. Even when Bakugo mocked all of them, they knew that they would not be able to compete with Izuku and Bakugo. When it came on to the sludge villain though, something interesting would have happened. Of course, the sludge villain would try to take over Izuku's body, but Izuku would simply freeze the man's body instead, leaving him for the heroes. All Might would apprehend the criminal right after Izuku left. The criminal was no longer any of Izuku's concern though, so he would just go on to train for 10 months. 10 months trying to figure out whether or not his quirk was only connected to himself, or if he could apply certain rules to other things. For example, he would end up going to Dagobah Beach in order to practice a certain theory he had by touching one of the objects, more specifically a fridge, and set up a rule for the fridge that he had just touched. He would set it up to where the fridge would become some sort of magnet for all the rest of the garbage at the beach. He would let go of the fridge, and next thing you know, once Next thing you know, all of a sudden, garbage would just start flying over to the fridge. The fridge would start to take on most of the garbage piling up, and although some would start to fall over, they would still be trying to connect with the fridge. Next thing you know, it's just like a giant cycle of, look, I don't even know how to describe it. Basically, just imagine that the fridge is consumed by trash and that's it. Overall, Izuku managed to clean up most of the beach within one day, just like that, and the rest of the stuff that was not affected because of the fact that they were not close enough to the fridge, well, Izuku would pick them up and pile them up with the rest of the garbage that managed to actually be that close to the fridge, in order to, well, be magnetically attracted to the fridge in the first place. Izuku would try to go a bit further every day until he eventually decided to incorporate even applying the rule to the air. He would find that he could only apply one rule at a time though during this time. Well, technically he could do two, but he preferred to keep his Kryptonian abilities more often than not. He had tested it out one time, but he never really liked the results. He was too used to the Kryptonian abilities anyways, and considering the amount of quirks here, you could never go wrong with Kryptonian powers as some sort of makeshift quirk. Sure, he had to drop a rule then for others, but it was fine in his book. At least the effects would still be there, rather than everything going back to how they were originally before he had placed a rule. For example, if he released the rule on the fridge, it did not really matter because all that would really happen is that the garbage wouldn't be sticking to the fridge anymore. That didn't necessarily mean, well, all of the garbage would just go back to their original areas like they were before Izuku came there. That's basically how the rules would have been set up. And say Izuku healed somebody and released that rule afterwards, that did not necessarily mean that the person would end up going back to their original harmed state or injured state. There was also seemingly a limit to the area effect, since it didn't really seem to go past 100 feet. But Izuku would be planning on increasing the size limit later on. By the end of the 10 months, Izuku felt rather accomplished. He would go to UA and take his entrance exams. He would find out that the tests were rather simple. The written exam was easy enough, and the physical exam, he simply flew around shooting lasers at the robots and crushing the bigger ones with his bare fists, showing how strong he really was compared to most of the others. He even managed to save Ochako too, unknowingly awarding himself rescue points. Everyone would be amazed seeing what Izuku was capable of throughout the whole entrance exam. He would have even won first place here. Izuku would move on to attend UA after getting his acceptance letter, and everyone would simply just stare at Izuku in amazement once he walked into Class 1A. Everyone wanted to talk to Izuku, hearing about what he did back at the entrance exam, hearing all of the abilities he managed to display. Like, what exactly was he? It was uncommon to hear about such an amount of different abilities from just one person. Even Todoroki would have been interested, wondering if he was some sort of half and half quirk user like him. But he would not really be approaching Izuku like that. Bakuro would have just been not really sulking, but more just angry at the amount of attention that Izuku was getting. That was until Aizawa stepped into the classroom. He would have had everyone suit up into their gym uniforms. Izuku would hear about the fact that there's some sort of competition going on. Basically, Omina made the mistake of saying that, it seems like this activity was going to be fun because of the fact that they were going to be allowed to use their quirks during these comprehension exams. And that was the biggest mistake because, well, Aizawa would go on to say that whoever got last place would end up getting expelled. Izuku was not interested in getting expelled at all. He knew that he was pretty much one of the strongest kids, if not the strongest kid in his old school, but he had no idea what these kids here at UA were capable of, and it would be an insult to hold back here, because for all he knew, he could end up being the one in last place and get expelled, ruining his chances of ever getting a hero license. So Izuku would try his best, and he would actually get first place here. He would have dominated the competition all throughout the tests, and everyone would just be looking at Izuku in amazement once again. But unfortunately, someone ended up getting expelled. This somebody being, well, Mineta. And I know that many people don't really like Mineta, so many people probably see this as a win anyways, even if he's just a comic relief character. Even though he's technically smarter than Izuku academically. Mineta would have been expelled and Izuku would leave school afterward. Everyone would just be trying to get to know him more though. With basically at the end of the day though, Izuku would have been walking home with Ochako and, well, Ida. The next day, everyone would end up finding out about the fact that they would be learning from All Might. He was going to be their combat instructor, and they were going to be doing some sort of combat training 101. They would even be allowed to wear their hero costumes, and then in this timeline, Izuku would suit up in a similar outfit to the one originally, the one his mother made. Except here there would be an S plastered onto the suit. Well, and with more green tones instead of yellow and red. Izuku would have looked up to All Might even more here, and All Might would just be looking at the kid and just facepalm because of the fact that Izuku's costume, it's just so obvious that it's just a reference to All Might. It's just so obvious, but at least he had the decency to put an S on there. Even then, it was so obvious that part was meant to represent Superman, considering how similar their abilities were. Due to the imbalance of students here though, Izuku would end up fighting Bakugo and Ida by himself, while Ochako would be with Momo in this timeline. Izuku would use his X-ray vision in order to see where the bomb was, and he would just fly to the top floor. He would easily blitz Ida and touch the bomb, infuriating Bakugo. Izuku would get elected class president the next day, and, well, the lunch incident remained similar, except for the fact Izuku would be the one to call out the fact that it's just the media outside. Izuku would move on to follow the rest of the class to the USJ, and on the way they would ask Izuku about his quirk. Here Izuku would explain the properties of his quirk. Basically, it's a two-step quirk. What happens is that Izuku needs to touch something and know the name of it, and then verbally state what sort of properties he's adding to it. For example, he could touch himself. And say that Izuku Midoriya will have the powers of, I don't know, of midnight for a day. Or maybe Aizawa, and next thing you know, Izuku's eyes would start to glow. People would try and use their quirks only to find that it's not working. Everyone would be jealous now because of the fact that Izuku could do such a thing. And Izuku admits that there's only one issue though. Like, he can only do that for like 2 things at a time. If he wanted to change it up, he could have it to where he could drop the properties he added to one thing and then apply new properties to another. but you can't have it be like, oh, there's three objects that all of a sudden have taken up new properties. Like, you can't just say, oh, this chair is able to turn anything it touches into gold, and this water bottle is all of a sudden bleach, and this glue is now Play-Doh. He could not simply do those sort of things. But if it was like two of them, well, he could actually have that be. But the only issue there would be that he would have to give up his powers in exchange. His Kryptonian abilities. Yeah, he's not willing to actually give those up right now. He always keeps that active because of the fact that he's had like a lot of time to practice those abilities, and he just would not feel the same if he were to just lose those abilities only to just grant some new properties to two things at a time. He's already capable of doing so much with these abilities by themselves, by just itself. Being able to do something else with another thing is just a perk, you could really say. Everyone would still be quite jealous, even with the conditions of Izuku's quirk, because, well, he could technically have any quirk he really wanted any time of the day, while they had to basically grow up using one quirk their whole entire life. Heck, this kid probably could have wished to have the Midas touch and immediately just become rich and famous just from that, technically. But once he arrived at the USJ, as soon as the villains would have appeared, Izuku would have done something interesting. He would have grabbed the atmosphere and stated that an invisible odorless gas would begin to spread throughout the USJ, and it would be able to knock out the villains, all those who are opposing the heroes within this vicinity right now. It would start off covering a distance of 100 feet, but it would begin to spread from there. The students wouldn't be affected, but the villains would. They would drop like flies. Those who were not affected just yet, they would try to attack, and Aizawa would have been the one to actually erase their quirks. Izuku would have helped Aizawa take down the remaining villains and do it in a very speedy fashion. Ida would recruit the rest of the heroes from the school once he found an opportunity to run away, and they would just do the cleanup from there. The USJ incident wouldn't be talked about as much during this timeline because of the fact that the villains weren't much of any sort of threat. Pretty much it went like this. The only people that really talked about the USJ incident were the people at school, and even then it just became a rumor more than anything. The classes would have still tried to observe Class 1A in curiosity though, of what they were capable of, and the sports festival would happen. Izuku would once again dominate the competition. He would have been flying all the way to the finish line in the first part. The second part, the cavalry battle, he would have ended up flying to the top of the building with a 10 million point headband over his head. Izuku would stay there for the entirety of the cavalry battle, saving first place for his team. In the tournament part, Izuku is simply just milli-whopped Shinso, not even giving him the chance to speak. He would have milli-whopped Shoto after finding out that the kid refused to use his fire half, and he would have milli-whopped Bakugo. He would have let Bakugo at least try to put his best effort into actually defeating him, but Izuku would end up being the one to humiliate Bakugo. At the very end, just throwing him out to the ring unconscious. Izuku would be sought after by several heroes, and all for one, he would have seen how powerful this kid was. He would be interested in gaining their quirk. He absolutely needed a new vessel after all, since, well, Shigaraki had been captured by the heroes, and Izuku just seemed to be such a strong person. He wasn't even interested in just the quirk anymore. He wanted the boy's body, not in an Orochimaru sort of way either. Actually, probably that, to be honest. Izuku would end up choosing a hero name, and it would end up just being, well, Superman. And then Midnight would eventually just say, well, that name is kind of copyrighted, so Izuku would just go with Super Deku. A very uncreative name, to be honest, but it was the best he had at the moment. Midnight just sighed and let Deku go ahead and have that name. When it came on to the internships, Izuku would have ended up interning with Night Eye. All Might's former sidekick. That was the main reason why he ended up deciding to go with him, because of his connection to All Might, and they would end up proving themselves even more capable than Mirio. Night Eye would have somewhat regretted having Mirio be All Might's successor here, just because of what Izuku was capable of, and he could only imagine what Izuku would be like with One for All. If anything ever happened to Mirio, he supposed Izuku would be a good backup though. Izuku would train with Night Eye in how to predict an enemy's movements, and they would also go patrolling with Mirio from time to time. On one of their patrols though, they would have ended up bumping into a little girl with white hair, with bandages along her arms. Izuku would hold her and hear a man's voice from the other side, asking for her back. Izuku would find out that this guy was apparently, well, the girl's father, and that the girl was a bit of a klutz. Izuku wouldn't believe a word of what this guy was saying though, and he would just fly off with her, taking Eri to the hospital. Overhaul's plans would have been halted until he got the girl back. Night Eye would have been furious at first, but would find that this actually accelerated his plans when it came on to the Shiosaikai. This interested him. This was unexpected. Night Eye would apologize for being so angry at Izuku, but he would still tell Izuku that he did make a pretty foolish and hasty decision though, and he would suggest that Izuku think more logical next time. It just so happened that this time around there was a more positive effect in the end. So yeah, essentially just be smarter next time around. And in terms of Ida, due to the fact that Izuku was not here in this canon, and he never really made any sort of friendship with Todoroki, Ida would have died to staying in this timeline. The final exams, Izuku would be paired up with Bakugo against All Might, and rather than fly away, Izuku would actually want to test his strength here against the number one hero. Izuku would find that he could actually be on par with the man, which surprised everybody, including All Might. Bakugo would just be in Izuku's shadow once again. Izuku would realize that there was something up with All Might though as they fought, and then he would eventually find out about All Might's injury. He would touch All Might after they had apprehended the man, and apply a new rule here to allow All Might to actually heal from any injury, no matter how severe. Izuku would also inform All Might though of a certain fact. It's that, well, this was only going to be a temporary power up for the man. It wasn't like it could be any sort of permanence. But it didn't really even matter since All Might was already super strong. So it would basically be that just be a bit more careful. Don't try and rely on this new thing I just gave you, because there's a good chance that it may just disappear soon after. Like the effect, like you will still be healed, but I'm not too sure about any other circumstances. Say if you were to be battling another villain, don't try and rely on that healing factor that I just gave you. As for the forest training arc, Izuku would simply touch the ground and have it to where the dirt monsters would just return back to the ground. That was the rule he ended up setting up, and this would just made a clear path for the students to walk back to the mountain area. Everyone would just go on to train their quirks from there, while Izuku would end up finding about the whole situation with Koda, Mandalay's nephew, and why he hated heroes. Villains would actually even arrive at the forest launch, and Izuku would immediately start searching for Koda. During this time, though, he would end up encountering Muscular. He was about to grab the kid and crush him within his arms, but Izuku would get in the way, pulverizing the villain and saving Koda. Izuku would go on to help the other students and manage to save Tokoyami. Unfortunately, Bakugo would still get captured here. Momo would put GPS on one of the Nomu though. By the time the heroes find All Might, well, not All Might, but All for One Space, students from Class 1A would also be there in order to rescue Bakugo. Izuku would fly in and immediately grab Bakugo, but All for One would actually stop Izuku from getting too far though, because of the fact that he wanted to use Izuku as his newest vessel since they already got rid of Shigaraki. He only found it fair that it's like an eye for an eye, an arm for an arm. That's basically the sort of phrase that he lived by. Izuku would grab the air though, once again, but this time he would do something very different from the USJ. Here it would have been this. For basically within 100 meters, it would go a little like this. All for One would basically have no air to breathe within 100 meters of here. For like the next 100 meters, it's basically the atmosphere is non-existent for All for One. Izuku would see All for One begin to suffocate, and All Might basically taken back to his prime body, using the last of One for All he had. He would begin to take advantage of this new situation, pummeling the villain into the ground. He was desperately trying to get air, but All Might was not allowing him to get out of that 100-meter barrier. Izuku would have actually been recognized as a hero that day for helping All Might, although the teachers would have still reprimanded him for his actions and even have it to where he was suspended for a good couple of days. People would be calling Izuku the next #1 hero though, and the next Stars and Stripes of Japan. The new All Might, that's what like a bunch of people were calling him after finding out about his quirk. And well, the #1 hero of America, where they would just be reading the newspaper, sipping their tea on one of her days off, and she would smile, seeing that there was someone else like her as well. She supposed that she would need to give Japan a visit one of these days and maybe meet up with this kid. maybe give him a couple of pointers about how to use that quirk of his. And that is all for now. Well, yeah, that's pretty much all for this What If, guys. This was basically meant to be a one-shot. This thing basically turned into a movie. So yeah, it is King Tyrant X out. You guys already know the deal. Like if you like the video. If you like this video, you should definitely check out a couple of others. Maybe you like them too. And if you like those videos, you may want to subscribe in order to see some more. Leave a comment. Oh, and share it to some of your friends and family members in case they're interested in what else as well. It's your boy King Tyrant X signing out.